All right, everybody. Hi. What's the crack? Thanks for joining us today on Belfast Whisky Week. Apologies if you were expecting the suave Scottish gentleman that is Paul Kane, but you're going to have to do with me, I'm afraid. Phil Crawford, also known as Causeway Coast Whisky Reviews. Thankfully today for Joe, I'm not going to be critiquing the whiskies. I'm just going to be sort of directing procedures today. But we want to thank Joe Magowan here from Dillon Bass for joining us today as well. And obviously, just want to say a few words about Belfast Whisky Week. I think we can safely say yesterday was a really great success. We're hoping that success carries through for the rest of the week. It's a phenomenal thing that Paul and his team have really brought together. Whenever Paul said it to me at the start, because of COVID, that he was thinking about taking thing online, I thought it was absolutely mental. But fair play to the chap, for everyone that has worked really hard behind the scenes to make this a possibility. So hopefully we can all have a great day today and also enjoy the rest of the week as well. For anybody that's joining us for the tasting today, as we go through the whiskies, if you want to fire any comments or questions into the question box or in the comments section, myself or the admins will try and pick those up. And Joe knows his stuff, so like really bombard him with really difficult questions, and that will make my life a bit easier as well. So it will. So basically, the running order today then is we're going to go through 6 different drinks that Method of Madness are providing for us in your box. We're starting off with a single grain, then we're going on to the single malt. Then we're looking at 3 pot stills. We have the chestnut, the cherrywood, Hungarian oak, and then finally we're looking at the gin. And so what we're going to do is we have a pre-recorded video that Joe's done, so we can admire the magnificence of the man's beard. And he's going to talk us through the whiskies in order, and then after each particular segment, we'll stop the video, and myself and Joe will have a wee chat about the whiskey, about the drink. And again, if you guys have any questions, we'll try and pick those up. So perhaps we could kick off with the first whiskey there, the video for the first whiskey, please.
Hi, my name's Joe. I'm an Irish whiskey ambassador for Dillon Bass, and today I'm going to be your host for your virtual Method Madness tasting. It's my job to be a representative of the whiskies from Midleton Distillery. Midleton's the biggest distillery in Ireland, and it's where we produce our brands like Jameson, Powers, Redbreast, Spots, and of course, Method Madness. Normally I would do my tastings in front of a live audience where things are a bit more tactile, which obviously has its advantages, but doing a virtual tasting has some advantages too. One of which being at any point, if you want to pause, you want to take a break, you want to get a glass of water, you can just hit the pause button there. The way this whiskey tasting is going to work is I'm going to chat to you a little bit about Method Madness as a brand, and then we're going to work through each whiskey one by one. So if you can resist, please hold off on tasting the whiskey until we reach it, because you'll appreciate it even more if you know a little bit about the background behind it. In 2015, we started distilling in our micro distillery. Basically, if we wanted to try and experiment a new mash bill or a new wood type, it would be impractical to use our regular distillery, as we wouldn't be able to shut it down just for one experiment. So we decided to create a micro distillery as a little bit of a hub for our experiments and innovation. Out of the micro distillery came the idea for a new brand of whiskies, Method Madness. And this could be best described as our experimental or innovative style of whiskey, where we explore different types of distillates and different types of wood influence. We launched the range in 2017 with 4 different whiskies, 3 of which I have in front of me today. What's important to note about these whiskies is not only the style of whiskey, so the style of spirit, but also the type of wood that these whiskies are finished in. Finishing is when you take a whiskey that spent most of its life in one or more types of barrel and then finish the maturation period in another barrel. First up, we have our Method Madness single grain finished in virgin Spanish oak. Grain whiskey is generally produced by taking malted barley and mixing it with another type of cereal. In our case in Midleton, we mix our malted barley with maize, a type of corn, and we use a column still as opposed to a pot still. Historically in Midleton, we would have actually blended our grain whiskey with our pot still whiskey to make blended Irish whiskies like Jameson, Powers, and Midleton Very Rare. So this was the first time we've actually bottled a single grain whiskey, which is to say it's not blended with any other style. This particular whiskey begins its life in American ex-bourbon barrels before being finished in virgin Spanish oak. On the nose, very much about that Spanish wood influence. A lot of fresh pencil shavings. For a friend of mine who's a carpenter, often says this reminds him of his workshop. It's very light, it's very sweet, it's very floral. And then on the palate, very, very light. Again, very sweet, quite spicy as well, but it's more of a white pepper or a wood spice rather than that traditional pot still spice. A lovely bit of citrus coming through as well, but overall just very, very light, very floral, and a real contrast to our pot still whiskey, which I think is one of the reasons I enjoy this so much.
All right, Joe. So first one there we have is a single grain. So single grain is something that we're not commonly seen over in Ireland. So what was the idea about releasing a single grain then?
Yeah, like single grain. I mean, at the time when we released this single grain, there was, I think, maybe three or four other Irish single grains. So like a really, really small amount of them on the market. And obviously we've been making grain in Middleton for decades. You know, it's a main component. Like typically, you know, you've got Jameson, you've got Powers Gold Label, you'd have Middleton Very Rare, would have a huge number of blends, but we never actually released a single grain. So I think the idea was just to actually let people try some of our grain whiskey on its own. I've always been a big fan of grain whiskey in general, and like I don't mean to toot our own horn, but I do think the grain we make is very good. So I think being able to showcase it really was the kind of main idea behind this. And I think the combination of bourbon and virgin Spanish oak really allows the grain to shine. You know, we're not kind of putting some really heavy wood influence in there that's going to kind of cover it up. I think when you taste this, you can really get that kind of that Middleton grain influence.
Yeah, and like what do you think the virgin Spanish oak sort of brings to the whole mix then?
So virgin Spanish oak, it would have been the first time we'd have used it. You know, typically our Spanish oak would always have been previously seasoned with sherry. For me, it really is. It's a completely different flavor profile. Like it's a much more intense wood character. You know, it hasn't had time for the sherry to kind of soften it. It just brings a little bit more of that kind of intense spice. And I mean, like it really is wood. You know, to me on the nose, it's the first thing you get is just this intense wood character. Yeah, and it's a different kind of wood. Like it's not that kind of sweet, honeyed, caramelly American, you know, influence that you get from a virgin American cask.
No,
it's more in your face. It's more intense.
Yeah, like one of the things I sort of actually, guys, for anybody that's watching along here, if you want to like fire in your tasting notes or what you're getting on the nose or anything, like one of the things, just looking at the notes that I have from whenever I reviewed them a while ago, and like I really got that freshly shaved pencil kind of note, but there's like just loads of vanilla and butterscotch as well, kind of dominates, and then whenever you were tasting it, clove was actually one of the big things I got, which I think the virgin oak really kind of lent to the whiskey.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, yeah, it definitely, like when you get that cloviness, that spicy character, I do get a bit of the clove, but for me, it's a lighter type of spice. You know, if you compare it to something like any of the Powers whiskeys, where you're going to get more of that intense black pepper, it's a wee bit more of a delicate spice. Like for me, like I know in the video I said white pepper. That's more the area that I'm getting. And I just saw a comment there that somebody's saying try it with a bit of water. These are all bottled at 46, so they're absolutely, you know, you can drink them at that strength and it's lovely. But you know, if you want to play around with water, like these definitely can benefit from a bit of it. And someone had a question there about the malted barley maize content. Generally, for grain, it would be roughly 80% maize and then 20%. Although we do sometimes go a wee bit lower on the malted barley.
And what was I had a question there, but I've forgotten it now.
I just want to say as well, just for this one, I'm probably not supposed to. I think I've been told off for saying I have favorites, but for me, out of the range, this is the one that I find myself gravitating to the most.
Yeah. Can you give a general age statement for this, or like roughly in a ballpark?
I can't really tell you exactly how old these are, but I will. I mean, it's not older than 10 years. You know, it's
okay.
Not older than 10.
No problem.
And a little bit older than the chestnut pot still, which I think some people find quite interesting.
Oh, it's a bit older than chestnut pot still. Oh,
yeah.
Okay, yeah, there you go. Yeah, I see Cassandra there mentioned that she's getting a bit of baking spice in the finish. Which I think you do get that, some sort of like the nutmeg and clove and allspice and things like that on the finish.
Yeah.
So perhaps at this point then we could just move on to our second whiskey. So we're going to go on to the single malt then. Yeah, guys, we have pop-ups here as well about how you would rate the single grain, and we're going to have those pop-ups come through the whole way through the videos. If you want to give a little score of what you think, hopefully we're going to collate all these scores for the end of Whiskey Week and maybe do a little league table, just for a bit of crack. So
I saw the option to come up to vote there on my screen, so I'm just voting 10 out of 10 every time.
Well, obviously, Joe, I mean,
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm not voting.
I'm going to say do it later just so that I don't sort of mislead anybody. So yeah, if we could just get the video there for the single malt then.
Next up, we have our Method Madness single malt, which is finished in Limousin casks from France. So at the time, it was very unusual to see a single malt whiskey in the Irish Distiller portfolio. So this was a very, very exciting release. So this whiskey began its life in American ex-bourbon barrels before being finished in Limousin casks from France. Limousin is an area in south-central France, and the casks from this region would generally be used to make cognac. So it was very, very unusual to see them being used to mature whiskey. And at the time, these were actually the most expensive casks we've ever sourced. On the nose, for me, this whiskey is all about that sweet shop character. I get plenty of red fruit pastels, cola cubes, a little bit like brambly, blackberry, a little bit jammy, lots of lovely sweet red fruit going on. And then on the palate, again, big jammy red fruit. That lovely malty, nutty character coming through. A bit biscuity, kind of like a cake batter or a ginger snap biscuit. Again, just quite a contrast to our pot still whiskey that we're used to.
Okay, so that was our malt.
Yeah, that was a malt. So Joe, obviously, like malt is something that's not particularly associated with Middleton or IDL. So how did you end up bringing a malt to market?
Yeah, so no, you're absolutely right. It's not something we really are known for, and I don't think it's ever something that we're really going to be delving as much as, you know, like the Scottish distilleries or some of the other Irish distilleries. For us, generally, it's more about the pot still. Full disclosure, this was actually distilled at Bushmills. So the liquid in here was distilled at Bushmills. A lot of people don't realize that Bushmills was originally in the Irish distillers portfolio, so they would have been part of the same company. So this would have been distilled around the time that Irish distillers would have had Bushmills in the portfolio. And then obviously when we separated, there would have been a little bit of that liquid which we would have retained. And then eventually, you know, how do we release the malt whiskey from Middleton? Method Madness proved to be the kind of perfect brand to put it under, because it is a bit different, you know, in our circumstances anyway.
Yeah. So you were saying there about the use of the French Limousin oak. Like how much? I mean, you said that's some of the most expensive barrels that you buy. Like what sort of price range are we talking for a French oak?
Well, I can tell you for us, it was at least 5 times more expensive than you would pay for the likes of a bourbon barrel.
Right, okay.
Yeah, no, now this was what I mean 2.5, 3 years ago roughly. So, we could have there could be more expensive casks we're buying now.
Yeah.
But at the time, yeah, they were very expensive. So, Limousin, if you're not familiar with where it is, it's kind of south central France, and I don't know if it could cut off in the video there, but typically not really used for whiskey, not even really commonly used for wine. Occasionally it would be used for wine, but really it would be cognac and brandy it'd be more commonly used for.
Yeah.
And Tim's a question there just on the age range of the casks. I'm not sure if you mean the age of the barrels or of the actual liquid, but I can tell you that this is a 14-year-old. It's you know, got a little bit older than the grain and the pot still.
And what can we expect from the French oak? What can we expect that to give to the actual finished whiskey then?
For me, I think it's a lightness. Like a lot of the character I was getting there, like that jammy fruit character,
yeah.
I would typically get that from some malt, which I've tried from Bushmills before.
Yeah.
So for me, I think it just adds a little bit more of a delicate, like a little bit of a creamy character, but not as much, not like a delicate sweetness, you know, not as intense as your American oak or even as much sweetness, I think, as the Spanish oak.
Yeah, I think like one of the tasting notes that I had on it was that it seemed to bring like a slight menthol element. That was just one of the things that I picked up, especially in the palate. But you're right, it definitely adds like this massively creamy texture, I think, to the malt.
Yeah, it's got a big mouthfeel.
It definitely does. Just wondering how anybody's finding it out in the viewing public there. Any notes or any questions I'd like to ask Joe about it?
So Patrick Duffy says this applies to questions to tastings 2, 3, and 4. I'm not sure what you mean. Is that for the next one?
He's looking at the malt and the 3 pot stills that are to come.
Oh, okay. No, they wouldn't be seasoned, so they wouldn't have held anything before.
So the French oak then was that like toasted, or was it heavily charred, or?
Yeah, it would be cooked, as the guys would call it. It wouldn't be quite a char, but it would be lightly toasted.
Oh, okay, brilliant stuff. Right, well, guys, if we want to move on then to whiskey number 3, and in fact, you know what? I'm going to pour myself one of these because I love this stuff. Probably shouldn't really say that, but there you go. And I have a bottle at hand, so we'll go on to the video here for the chestnut pot still then, if I can, please.
Next up, we have our Method Madness single pot still, finished in French chestnut. At the time, this was probably the most exciting release because of the unusual wood type we used to finish this. So in Scotland, whiskey makers are restricted to using oak, whereas in Ireland, we have a little bit more flexibility. So in the Irish Whiskey Technical File, it says, Irish whiskey must be matured in species of wood such as oak. It doesn't explicitly say it has to be oak. So we took this as a bit of a cue to experiment with different wood types. Now, unfortunately, a lot of them didn't work, but the French chestnut really did. We're really happy with how this whiskey turned out. So this began its life in American ex-bourbon barrels and Oloroso sherry casks. We do have some Spanish influence here, before being finished in French chestnut. Beautiful color. And on the nose, lovely sweet red licorice. It's quite herbal, like a kind of fresh mint or garden herbs coming through. Lovely wood character, a little bit of pot still spice. And then lovely and rich in texture. There's some biscuity notes like lotus biscuits, some cinnamon, lovely ripe banana, or like banana bread. There's some of that lovely toffee notes in there as well. Overall, just beautiful whiskey and pretty unique as well. There wasn't many other whiskeys I could compare this to.
I feel like I'm missing out here. I'm watching a video of myself drinking whiskey, you're drinking whiskey, and I'm sitting here drinking coffee with some con man.
Well, you have a long day ahead, Joe, so it's probably a wise thing. So the pot still. So we noticed in the video there that you're saying that at the start that there was use of bourbon and Oloroso sherry. So was that pot still that was fully matured in those barrels first before the finish, or?
Yeah, it would have been a combination. So they would have been married together and then transferred into the chestnut hogsheads.
Excellent. So, who came about with the idea of sort of chestnut?
Yeah, so the micro distillery, it really is just kind of like a playground for distillate and wood types. So what the guys down there would have done is they would have created just very, very small casks, which they then trial some spirit in to see what the influence. So the likes of, for the chestnut or the cherry or the Hungarian oak, they would just make a small cask first of all and try it. And I know at the time when these were being released, there was a huge range of different woods that they tried. Like the harsh truth of it is a lot of them didn't work. A lot of the stuff just didn't take. And like there's some stuff in particular that like just did not work. It was not good. Whereas some of them, like the cherry, I think the guys landed on and were like, this is something we have to bottle. So it was one of the ones that they were, gutted about pouring everything else out and having to lose a lot of liquid, but this one was a delight, really.
Yeah, I see Cassandra there picking up that there's real loads of tropical fruit flavors, but then balanced nicely with the pot still spice. Like one of the things, I just think the nose on this is just like we should use that as aftershave. It's just so good.
Yeah, this is one that when we released them also, the first release would have had the single grain, the single malt, the single pot still, and then the 31-year-old as well. This was the one that sold out pretty much everywhere. Like you couldn't get your hands on it because it was just most people seem to really take to it. And I think you said it's your favorite then out of the kind of core.
It is, yeah. I'm still lucky enough, Joe, that I have like their original
batch one.
That's batch one, and then batch two. So we can see there's a bit of a difference in colour. But those were, I mean, the second batch wasn't a refill of the first batch barrel. Sure, it wasn't.
No. So the second batch was, if memory serves me correctly, it was 12 new casks. So we basically had to increase the amount that we were producing to meet the demand.
So is that? I mean, this is going to be a core range member now, isn't it, from Method Madness? Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'd get a lot of backlash if we decided to not make this anymore.
So Patrick there is asking, is chestnut used for any of the other spirits?
To my knowledge, no. I certainly haven't seen anything. I know definitely not at the time whiskey. I'm not sure if since then maybe some people are playing around with it, but no, not commonly used.
Yeah. I think for me, like one of the things about the chestnut, because I mean obviously it's a fairly new thing to like Irish whiskey. You guys were the first really to bring it to market. But it just seemed to add this real chocolatiness to the whiskey as well, a real cocoa note. Like I just thought the whole interaction was absolutely fantastic. It's just a whiskey that I will be buying constantly, basically. So
yeah,
I think it's absolutely superb.
I think that the fact that it's a single pot still as well really helps. I think if any of these whiskies, any of the finishes were going to be a pot still from the first range, I think this is one that was just a perfect fit because the spirit has that weight, it has that texture, which I think the chestnut needed. I think if you were to put a lighter style of whiskey in here, it just wouldn't be balanced.
There's Lulu is coming on and saying that it's like a liquid Kinder Bueno. Can't really argue with that, Louise.
Yeah, there's definitely some creamy chocolatey notes coming in.
Definitely. Well, at this point then, we'll maybe move on to our fourth one, which is, we'll go for the Hungarian oak then. So yeah, if we can get the video for the Hungarian oak, if that's all right, lads.
So whiskey number 4 is Method Madness Single Pot Still, finished in virgin Hungarian oak. So this whiskey began its life in American ex-bourbon barrels before being finished in virgin Hungarian oak casks from the Carpathian mountain range in northeast Hungary. And virgin Hungarian oak is known for having a very, very, very tight grain structure and a slow maturation, so some lovely, very subtle flavors. So on the nose, sweet and creamy, some lovely vanilla ice cream or fresh vanilla bean, some lovely toffee, kind of fudgy notes coming through, and just a little bit of that spice as well. On the palate, so again, sweet and creamy. I still get that lovely creamy vanilla ice cream quality. It's kind of developed into a little bit juicy, a little bit citrusy. So for me, there's a little bit of lemon, a little bit of lime. There's definitely something tropical in there as well, but just balanced really, really well with that lovely wood spice too. So probably one of the more subtle releases in Method Madness, but one that I'm a big fan of.
Brilliant stuff. So Hungarian oak, I mean, that's, I mean, you've sort of touched on it a wee bit, but could you give a bit more specifics as to how it's different from, say, American oak or other European oak?
The biggest difference really is a really, really tight grain structure. So one of the things about Hungarian oak is the liquid, when we actually cast it, it matures very slowly. So it's not like, when we use something like the chestnuts, like there would be a noticeable difference even after a few weeks. Yeah. A much, much more subtle influence on the Hungarian oak. And I think, to be honest, of all the Method Madness whiskies, this one probably is the most subtle. It won't have as distinctive character as maybe the chestnut or the grain. But for me, I actually quite like it for that reason. It's one that you just have to really sit and take your time with a bit more. And interestingly enough, this was one that I actually do think a touch of water can really open it up.
Yeah.
Again, always personal preference, but I think even just a few drops of water just brings out a little bit more of the kind of creaminess, a little bit of that like ice cream vanilla note that I would get from it.
Yeah, definitely in the nose. I'm sort of getting like a butterscotch sundae type of nose off it. I think it's quite pronounced.
Yeah, it's kind of like a dessert nose.
Yeah. So I take it then Hungarian oak would lend itself quite well to like a longer maturation period then. So if you wanted to bring out an age statement, Method of Madness or something, maybe this is one that you might.
Yeah, I would think so. I think something like, I keep coming back to the chestnut just for example, but I don't think you would be able to mature something in chestnut for for a very long period of time. Whereas this, yeah, there'd be a lot more potential for an older whiskey.
Yeah.
Definitely just a wee bit more of a subtle influence of flavor.
Now on the palate, I do. I know you think this is fairly subtle, but for me, actually, I get quite a lot of pepper off this actually. So I don't know whether that's actually more the distillate or whether that's the wood has added that.
Is it like black pepper or white pepper? What kind of spice do you think?
I would say it's more like a white pepper heat.
Yeah. To be honest, whether it's the distillate or the wood is probably up for debate. I think all of our pot stills will naturally carry a little bit of spice. But yeah, I think I would agree. Like this, it's for me, it's again, it's just a little bit more of a subtle spiciness. It doesn't jump out, and I don't get as much of it on the nose either on this whiskey. Like when you smell it, I would probably struggle if I hadn't had it to say it's a pot still on the nose. But
yeah, I would agree with you there. I think that's like there isn't a huge amount of spice comes through, but there's definitely, as you said before, it's more like orchard fruits and there's vanilla, loads of butterscotch, but the spiciness definitely comes through. Or maybe it is the spirit, and maybe that's the spirit just letting itself shine through a wee bit more, to give it a bit of bite.
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah, maybe we can give a score there, guys. I see Cassandra thinks that this is like a flan on a glass. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah, like a Spanish flan, like a lovely custardy, eggy sort of dessert.
Yeah, or maybe even a bit of almond in there as well. Like it'd be an almond tart, pretty good. I see we have Whiskey Jason joining us from Germany as well. So we've got a bit of blogging royalty on here. So I'll tell you what, then we'll move on to the final whiskey that we have then, which is the Cherrywood. So we could have the video for the Cherrywood there.
Our final whiskey is Method Madness Cherry. So this whiskey began its life in American ex-bourbon and Oloroso sherry casks before being finished in cherry wood. On the nose, some lovely fresh coconut or desiccated coconut coming through. A little bit of toffee apple. There's some orchard fruits in there, but there's also this lovely toffee manuka honey quality. And taste. A little bit of licorice coming through there. A little bit tea-like as well. Like a kind of just like an Earl Grey tea quality. Again, that sweetness, that lovely toffee comes through towards the end. And a lovely little bit of delicate spice. Not as intensely spicy as our previous single pot stills, but there's a lovely subtle spice note there as well too.
Right, so that was your first time trying that one as well, Phil?
Yeah, it's the first time trying that one. So that's pretty interesting. I actually kind of get especially in the nose. And it's kind of quite earthier. Like I would describe it kind of like petrichor. Like whenever you've had a really hot day and then you have like a rain shower. And you get that smell of like
what is the word? There is a word for that. You've told me it before.
Yeah, petrichor.
Petrichor, yeah, that's great.
So that kind of, so it's kind of fresh. It's
yeah, it's more for me. It's lively is the word for it. Like I think for me this is more green on the nose. Like it's a bit more floral, but not. When I say floral, not like I would describe green spot as floral. It's not that. It's more of a kind of herbal floral.
Yeah. I would say that, yeah. I'm sort of picking up a wee bit of maybe like eucalyptus.
Yeah.
And just a touch of like furniture polish type of thing going on there. And not in a bad way. It's just like you kind of.
No, I would agree. It's funny. I hesitated saying that as well for the chestnut because if you were to describe a whiskey as furniture polish to somebody who was new to whiskey,
yeah,
would probably never touch the stuff.
No,
totally. Yeah, it's like a varnished wood.
Yeah, totally.
Like, we used to have an old piano. We used to sit in our house, and some of these whiskies, I get that like just old shiny wood quality coming through.
And it transfers actually onto the palate as well. Again, that's quite a lively spirit. There's a load of spice going on that really gets you at like the back of the
Yeah.
back of the palate here. Again, I'm sort of getting those like kind of peppery notes. Maybe a hint of clove, but more like clove rock or like cinnamon lozenge, like kind of like a sweet thing rather than the actual woody spice. But yeah, it's quite pretty unique.
I get a wee bit of ginger. And when you say cinnamon, like it's probably the same. We're probably getting something quite similar. It's that like warming spice.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Cassandra's saying there she's getting some wild rose on the nose and palate. And the power of suggestion is always a wonderful thing, isn't it?
Tim describe it as beautifully confusing. A bit like myself, Tim.
Yeah, I mean that's would the cherry be sort of along the same vein as the chestnut, where you have to be quite careful how long you mature or use it for the finish?
Not to the same extent, but yeah, to a little bit. Yeah, I think so. Again, I mean, I don't want to say that you couldn't age a whiskey in this for a very long time, because the truth is it hasn't been done, so I don't really know. But I'd say you'd probably want to be more cautious than like the Hungarian oak, for example.
Yeah, and I know some of these woods possibly can be quite hard for the coopers to work with and things like that. So I know the chestnut. I think I heard that it was quite hard to not leak. Make it not leak.
Yeah.
Do you have a similar sort of thing with the cherry or anything? Or
no, I think I'm not sure, because I haven't spoken to J.R. Buckley, who's our cooper, about this one in particular, because it's a little bit newer. But yeah, I know some of the previous casks posed big challenges. But yeah, as you say, particularly the chestnut, because it's just a bit more porous, so naturally you're going to have more losses over time. And I know some woods in particular are notorious for that. Like for example, Japanese oak. I've heard stories of Japanese oak just being a nightmare to work with, but such great flavor comes from it. So yeah, it's kind of like a balancing act.
And where do you source the cherry from?
This particular one, I'm not sure. I will try and find that out. We'll see if we can find that out really quickly. But I don't know. The other ones I know, I can even tell you exactly what forest they're from, but this one I'm not sure.
So Patrick's asking a question here that you say that these are from the experimental range, but do you think that these are the final products, or do you think that they will be tinkered with and sort of become part of the core range?
No, I don't think we're likely to see any changes to these ones. I think this is them at their kind of finished product. But what I would say is you're going to see a lot more tinkering with different liquids. So there is more stuff. We can expect more from Method Madness.
Fair enough, no problem. Well, we'll move on to our final drink then, which is the gin. And then after that, we'll talk about that for a bit, and then we can sort of get to know you a bit better, Joe, for those that don't know you. So again, guys, if you want to give a score there, and then we'll get the last segment of video on there for the gin.
So finally, a bit of a departure from whiskey with Method Madness Irish Gin. This is a micro-distilled Irish gin produced in the oldest gin pot still in Ireland and boasts 16 different botanicals, including black lemons and Irish gorse. While it can be enjoyed neat, I'd recommend you make yourself a gin and tonic with this and garnish with some fresh lemon.
I just want to confirm there, it's French cherry, so it comes from France, the casks.
Happy days. Thank you very much, Joe. Brilliant.
No worries.
So yeah, the gin, so that's at 46% as well, is it?
46. Sorry, 43 on the gin.
Right. And like I was able to try this actually down in a tasting actually at Middleton last July, I think it was. Because I'm not generally like the biggest gin fan. I have it every again, but I was totally amazed at how drinkable that was neat.
Yeah. Now it's funny. Towards the end of that video, I was suggesting people to make a gin and tonic. The only reason I was saying that is because the in this market, like the idea, I'm saying in this market, I know there's people from all over the world, but it's not really common to drink gin neat. Whereas if you go somewhere like Germany, it's totally common, and people will drink gin neat. They'll drink it with an ice cube.
Okay.
And I've sipped away at this just in a wee copita as a same way I would treat a whiskey.
Yeah. And it's nice to see like the local botanicals that were thrown in there, like the gorse and was it black lemon that was thrown in there as well.
Yeah.
Is there any other local botanicals other than the gorse that goes in?
The gorse would be the main one, really. But then the big ones, you would have things like angelica root, juniper, obviously, as well.
Yeah.
So 16 different botanicals in there. But for me, it's the gorse is the one that really comes across. Like, when I've had gorse when it's been used in beer before, and it always gives me like a coconutty kind of quality.
Yeah.
And I think I get a little bit of that coming through, like that coconut and like almost a wee bit buttery or something.
Yeah. I mean, every time I sort of smell gorse, all I can think of is like the Malibu suntan spray.
Yeah.
Just brings that to mind. But the gin's actually made in a pot still, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So this is produced in the oldest gin pot still in Ireland. So this is actually a refurbished pot still from the 60s.
Okay.
I don't know if anyone remembers Cork Crimson, but it was so Cork is one of our other gins, and we released a gin called Cork Crimson, and it was kind of like a premium gin before premium gin was about.
Okay.
So we're a bit early to the party, but this would be the same still that Cork Crimson was used in. And actually, the still itself, it's called Mickey's Belly.
Yeah.
And it's named after one of the old distillery managers, and he was a pretty big guy. And if you ever look at the shape of the still, it kind of goes down and it's very bulbous, like somebody's belly.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where the name came from.
So we have a question there for Peter Wilson. He's just asking, what's the base neutral spirit produced from?
It would be it'd just be a GNS, so it would be produced from maize, really. So it would just be like a grain neutral spirit, which is then distilled in the pot still with the botanicals.
Dead on. So I mean, is that just like a single distillation or double distillation, or
Just a single.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And I see Courtney saying that this is the best gin that she's ever had. So that's you've got a new convert there.
Yeah. Like to be honest, I'm probably the same as yourself. Like I wouldn't have been a big gin drinker. Like gin, I would if I was on holiday or something, Spain or somewhere, I'd probably have a gin and tonic. But when we released this, it did kind of open my eyes a wee bit more to gin, and the idea of drinking it neat or even with ice, So I think, yeah, definitely. I wouldn't say I'm converted like the same way I am with whiskey.
Yeah.
But I definitely appreciate it a lot more.
Yeah, I think I would be in the same boat there. I mean, I think there are some absolutely fantastic gins coming out in Ireland. But my problem is that, we all have limited resources. So obviously being a whiskey enthusiast, you sort of go, well, I don't know if I'll buy a bottle of gin over a bottle of whiskey, But yeah, definitely I appreciate them for what they are as well. It's great to see so much sort of craft coming into the thing now as well. So Ian there is asking, is the acacia wood expression of Method and Madness still in production, maturation?
So the acacia is a limited release, and it was only done for the Celtic Whisky Shop. So it's not available really anywhere else. And at this point, I think once it's gone, it'll be gone. Like I don't think there are plans to make it again. So if you're thinking about picking up a bottle, yeah, I would probably get it where you can.
Get it where you can.
Yeah.
I have to say, like, I mean, this is the sample I got. I mean, the color in that is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's a very intense whiskey. Like, now to be honest with you, I've only drank the acacia I think twice, because it's a limited release.
Yeah.
So I think the last time I had it would have been shortly after it was launched, really. But yeah, from memory, it's very intense. Like, it would be the closest to the chestnut if you were to compare it, in terms of intensity.
Right, fair enough. Well, Joe, here, like, thanks for taking us through like the different whiskies and the gins, and hopefully all the guys that are reviewing at the minute, like, just keep on battering away. If you have any questions at all, throw them in here. Any comments you want to make, just so that we can keep this going. But now you have a few drinks to sample and to spend the next wee while. Just thought we could chat to Joe a bit more, just about actually who he is and what he does. So if you just want to explain like who you are, what your job is, and what distillery or brands that you're looking after.
Yeah. So I work locally for a company called Dillon Bass, and Dillon Bass is the easiest way to think of it is we're kind of part of Irish Distillers.
Yeah.
So Irish Distillers would be the biggest producer and brand owner of Irish whiskey. So obviously, Jameson, Powers, Redbreast, Spots, Method Madness, big portfolio, and Dillon Bass is like the Northern Ireland section of it. So I started working for Dillon Bass 4 years ago, and originally I was just the brand ambassador for Powers. So I would have only been used for like Powers tastings and training, and then that kind of gradually changed into working across the different brands. And then now my official title is Prestige Irish Whiskey Developer. So I'm kind of split between a brand ambassador role and then between a marketing role. So kind of spend a bit of my time out doing tastings and working really closely with bars, bartenders. And then the other half would be kind of more office based, more kind of behind the scenes, more planning what's kind of coming next. Which is great for me, because I'm sure if anybody, like we all know loads of brand ambassadors and it's great. But after you've been doing it for a few years, it's nice to be able to have at least 2 days a week where
you're at home.
Yeah, exactly. So no, it's great for me, because like as much as I it's nice to have that bit of rhythm and being able to like work from home or work in the office. Like I still get to be out in the road, and I get to do tastings, and I get to see people who are drinking our whiskeys. So no, it's pretty much a perfect kind of balance for me.
And so you cover, to a certain extent, all the brands now then, don't you? Do Jameson, Powers, Method and Madness, Redbreast, and Middleton, because and you would be heavily involved in organising the events and so on that Dillon Bass on them. So
officially, I work across what we call our prestige brands.
Okay.
So Powers and Prestige. So any of the single pot stills and the Middleton range really, and then Method and Madness too. So Jameson, I don't do as much with. So Anna is our Jameson ambassador, and she's going to be doing a tasting later today. So she would do more of the Jameson area. Having said that, like they cross over. So Anna would help me out with a load of stuff, and I would help her out. And obviously Jameson is our core brand. So like everybody in the company to an extent does work with the Jameson brand. But yeah, really more across the premiums. But then Dillon Bass, we distribute a number of different products from the Pernod Ricard portfolio. So I do a wee bit of work with our mezcal and tequila range as well. So like Altos and Del Maguey. And then we have 8 Degrees in the portfolio, 8 Degrees beer.
Oh, yeah.
We have wines. So like you end up doing bits and pieces of everything, which is great. Like that's
excellent.
A big portfolio. It's nice to be able to play around with everything.
And like, how are you finding exploring the world of mezcal and tequila?
If there was any other white spirit or like unaged spirit that would draw me away from tequila, it would be mezcal. It's something I've only really got into quite recently. But when I tried it, I just didn't know what it would taste like. I didn't know what mezcal could taste like.
Yeah.
You've probably had some mezcals, I imagine. Like,
well, I mean, it's funny because probably like a lot of people, my introduction to tequila was like Jose Cuervo.
Yeah.
And I remember going on holiday to the States, and my friends introduced me to like a Mexican guy who was living in New Jersey, and he just like burst out laughing whenever he was like, "Oh, that's all you've ever tried? Well, no wonder you don't like tequila." And he was like, "You have to come to my house," he says, "because if you like whiskey," he says, "I have tequilas and I have mezcals that you can just sip on like you have like a whiskey."
Yeah.
At the start, I was a bit kind of like, I'm just not keen on this idea. But like some of the stuff he gave me was just totally mind blowing, especially whenever you get into the like rosados and the anejos and things, and mezcal just having that smoky characteristic. Now it's not something that I have explored much, but it's something that would definitely like to try and get into a bit more of.
Yeah, I think for me, like I think you would enjoy it because you like peated whiskey. Like some of the mezcals I've had are so intensely smoky.
Yeah.
And the thing about it as well is mezcal has like a huge range of different species of agave you can use.
That's true, yeah.
And generally, like geographically, they'll be different wherever you go. So like there's this language of terroir, and it's so reflective of the landscape. Like it's something that I think you could really delve into, which is one of the reasons I'm almost a bit cautious about going to near it, because I spend enough money on whiskey. But yeah, no, it's a whole spirits category that's.
And I think for us as well, though, because like one of the guys that writes for Malt, Taylor, he kind of leans more towards bourbons and things, but because mezcal and tequila is a lot more readily available in the States, he's been doing a lot of pieces on mezcal and tequila, like Sotol and things like that.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's probably one of the problems for us, is that it's because it's an imported liquid, it's maybe a bit more pricey than it would be over in Mexico and America, and it's just harder to get like the really under the radar like craft stuff that would probably blow your mind.
Yeah, it's frustrating because like I've obviously friends in America, and when I see pictures of their back bar, and they've just, but I mean, like you're talking, some of these guys they're only a few miles north of the border, like, so it's just much more available. And then the other problem with mezcal is like there just isn't a lot of it, capacity for production. It's not like any other spirits, like especially when you look at these kind of artisanal, smaller brands, there just physically isn't a lot of liquid. But I think it's the same as like any other category. The more people that buy it and explore it, hopefully will eventually bring the price down. And I know now, like even obviously pre-lockdown before COVID, there's a few bars in Belfast where I live, which are starting to kind of expand their selection a wee bit because there's a wee bit of demand for it.
Yeah.
So fingers crossed.
And I think that's the thing as well, though, that actually, like one of the things I found about whiskey is that it inherently broadens your horizons anyway, because whenever I started out, I was sort of starting out with like, does a £20 bottle of whiskey or a £30 bottle of whiskey, is it better than a £12 or a £20 bottle of whiskey? But then you started going, well, okay, so this one's a sherry finished or it's sherry matured. And then you wanted to go, well, I need to go and try the sherry that this was matured in, so that I can see why am I getting this flavor profile and does it translate?
Yeah.
That was one of the reasons why I started drinking things like Amontillado and Fino, was because of different whiskies that I was buying. And so then I think your curiosity just grows anyway, where you're kind of like, well, let's go and explore this avenue. And that applies equally as much to the gin and things as well,
I wouldn't have been like, I wouldn't be exploring tequila, mezcal, cognac, like any of those spirits if it hadn't started with whiskey. And sherry in particular, like sherry is one that is such an underappreciated category of wine.
Absolutely.
Like a lot of people think sherry is either just for making whiskey, just for maturing, for seasoning, or it's that bottle that comes out once a year at Christmas to pour over trifle. But like, I'm sure you obviously know, but once you scratch the surface in sherry, you realize like it's this hugely complex and really old category of wine, like massive history behind it. And if you ever get a chance, it
used to be such a popular drink, and then in a way it kind of suffered from a bit of what happened with whiskey, where it was kind of like seen as an old person's drink.
I read an article about that it was a lot of like cocktails and shots that came around in the kind of 80s, or sorry 70s, which moved people away from sherry, and then since then it's been in decline, and unfortunately it's just really underappreciated, and a lot of people don't know what it is, but you can get like sherry is cheap is the thing as well. You can get great sherry for not a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely something that I would encourage, especially whiskey drinkers who are maybe starting along their journey and things. I would always encourage them. I mean, like Paul's already doing one of the packs later on this week where it's wine and whiskey, where you're getting, and I thought that was a great idea to be able to highlight to people, like, this is where you can find these sort of flavor profiles that complement the whiskey that, the base spirit that is went into these casks. And you think about things like Palo Cortado, that is just one of these mad fruit naturally occurring things. I mean, it can be designed, and it's such a rare thing, but it's such a complements whiskey so well, and we've seen Dumbles and so on doing that very well. So, what about Whiskey Club then? Whiskey Club NI? What was? Can you tell us what that is and what the thought process was behind that?
Yeah. So Whiskey Club is essentially, it's our kind of Northern Irish, obviously where I'm based, our platform for bringing all of our whiskey brands together. So we have a big portfolio, and like for us to have everything under one brand or one umbrella, it just kind of made sense for us, rather than having like a separate thing for Jameson and something separate for Powers and something separate for Redbreast. We just wanted to have this is our club, and this is all the brands together. So any of our events that we do, so if I do like a whiskey tasting or like a whiskey and beer pairing or whiskey and food, generally we would use our Whiskey Club, like our website and our social media channels, to promote it. We do have a website as well, so it's whiskeyclub.com, and that's where we put like all the information. So you'll read a little bit about where our whiskies are made, a bit about the history behind them, a little bit about the production. We are kind of updating it at the moment as well, so it's still a bit of a work in progress. But what we want to do is, for people in Northern Ireland, if you want to know where to buy whiskey or where to drink whiskey, we can kind of direct people towards it. So
that's a great idea.
yeah, so a lot of it came from the idea of tourists. If you were to arrive in Belfast from the States or somewhere else in Europe, and you wanted to go get a whiskey experience, like without naming names, you could quite easily end up going to the wrong bar and being completely underwhelmed. Like there's a lot of wee bars in Belfast that people don't know about them, and like Biddles is a great example.
Totally,
so Biddles is one of my favorite bars, and a lot of people don't know it's there. You'd walk past it, but if you actually walk in, and you're just overwhelmed by this massive selection of whiskey.
Yeah.
So for us, being able to call out some of those great bars and experiences around Northern Ireland is important, and then also for retailers too. So if you want to buy a bottle of whiskey in Northern Ireland, you don't know where to go. We'll have a map then of here's all the best shops to visit, the best selections.
Excellent. And you do things like cocktail serves and stuff, like suggestions, don't you, on the website too?
Yeah. So we give like a little bit of guidance about how to drink whiskey. So yeah, obviously you can have your whiskey neat, but then we'd have different cocktail recipes. So we work really, really closely with the bartending community. So if they have a cocktail that they want to showcase, we can kind of promote it on Whiskey Club. Or if a bar has done something really creative with one of our brands, we'll talk about it there. But yeah, I guess the easiest way to explain it is just everything whiskey, everything that we do or whiskey kind of comes under the Whiskey Club banner.
Yeah, and I know that you've personally kind of worked quite hard with a lot of like the local bartenders and stuff in Belfast to sort of bring everyone together, haven't you?
Yeah, yes. We have our own like bartender club. So it's called the High Ballers Club, but we started it 3 years ago because if you ever look at any kind of big metropolitan city like London or Melbourne or Dublin, there's a really close community for bartenders. And while we do have that absolutely here, bartenders all know each other. They didn't have like a platform together, so we just started a Facebook group, and we use the Facebook group as a way to kind of just to keep in touch with them, to share ideas, to network. So like throughout lockdown, obviously a lot of the bartenders were either furloughed or just out of a job, so we were able to kind of keep in touch with them there and provide resources for training. Here's things you can do in the house while you're not working. And then we would do monthly events with them too. So we kind of like bartenders do the work for us. They do all the heavy lifting really, like for our brands. So as a way to say thank you, we'll run events for them every month and like try and give them something that they can't normally get. So like for Method Madness here, the bartenders would have tried Method Madness long before any consumers. We would have brought them together and said like, here's our Hungarian oak, we're launching this next month, you can get a sneak preview of it.
Happy days, yeah. And it's kind of sort of engendered a bit of friendly competition in a way, hasn't it? Like they're kind of, not saying they're always out to each other, but I mean there is that sort of, you can always see that with the bartenders. I think there's a wee bit of friendly competitiveness between them.
Bartenders are the most competitive people I've worked with, and like, and I mean that in the best possible way. So, like, they really want to be seen.
Thing though for like the hospitality industry though over here as well, that that it is then at a high level.
Yeah. It is.
And it does sort of make Northern Ireland proud really whenever people go around and they can try like absolutely fantastic cocktails, and they know that and that's one of the things I liked about the way that sort of worked was if whenever I was say down in Port Stewart and like Seamus Oak was working down there, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, if I was saying, I'm going to go down to Belfast or something, he would go, well, here, go and such a bar. They're doing like this absolutely cracking cocktail. You have to go and try that,
Yeah.
So great from that point of view.
I think a lot of people don't realize how good the hospitality scene in Northern Ireland is. Like we all know it because we go out and we drink here. But if you were coming here as a tourist, like even from Dublin, like we have obviously people who work for our distillers come up to Belfast, for a day or so, and a lot of them haven't been here or haven't been out in ages, and they're generally like, wow, I didn't realize that the bar scene was as good. Not only just the bars, but the bartenders that work in them as well. And like as you say, guys like Seamus O, like those are the guys that end up staying, and doing great work in the hospitality. So like a lot of the good people who were bartending 2 or 3 years ago are now working as like brand reps or brand ambassadors or they stay in the industry.
Brilliant. So maybe we could talk a wee bit then just about the brand itself then, about Method and Madness. So where did the idea come for this brand then?
So it came from the micro distillery. So the micro distillery was built in 2016, and the kind of rationale behind it was, if we wanted to experiment or try something different, it just wouldn't be practical to use our regular garden still house or our Barry Crockett still house, because those stills, if you've been like, they're running non-stop to meet the demand for Jameson really, and some of our other brands. So it would just be impractical to stop them and try a different mash bill. So we decided to make the micro distillery, which is it's in one of the old warehouses. And I say a micro distillery, it's actually still quite big. It's compared to some other smaller distilleries, it's fairly big.
Yeah, I think quite a lot of distilleries would be quite envious of that setup. To be fair, Joe.
Yeah, I mean it's a slick setup. It is nice. If anybody's watching, you're ever in Middleton, you can do a Middleton behind the scenes tour, and you can actually get in to get a look at the micro distillery. But we created the micro distillery to experiment, and then that was where the idea for Method Madness came. So if we were going to put an unusual distillate, unusual wood type, it wouldn't really have fitted with any of the other brands. Like if you think it like Pars or Redbreast, they have their DNA, their profile. You wouldn't want to bring in something that's going to change that. So we just wanted to have one brand that we can basically do whatever we want with. Really push the boat out, try something new. The name itself, so Method, is about the style, like the styles of whiskey that we've been making in Middleton. We've been doing it for a very long time. I think we're pretty good at it. And then the Madness is about the unusual end of it, so experimenting and trying something a bit different.
Yeah. So then, like, what actually happens at the micro distillery? Like, what actually is distilled there then?
So all these the whiskies that we've tried so far, so obviously other than the gin, they wouldn't have been produced in micro distillery because the micro distillery's only been open since 2016. So there are some mash bills that have been matured and are maturing, which we will eventually see, most likely under the Method Madness brand. So just for example, like we've done a mash bill with oats, we've done a mash bill with rye.
Yeah.
So the last time I would have tried those would have been September. It was Whiskey Social last year, so less than a year ago. I think from memory, and they were two and a half years old at that time, so they weren't quite ready. Legally, obviously, it wasn't whiskey, but like the rye in particular, I could have drank that. You could have bottled it, and it was amazing. Like, so that's kind of what's happening. So we're really experimenting with different mash bills, and hopefully within the next few years we'll be starting to see some of that liquid.
Correct me if I'm wrong as well, though, but like the micro distillery is where like your apprentice distillers are trained, isn't it?
Yeah. So the Jameson has the Jameson graduate program, which is for kind of brand ambassadors, and then the Jameson Distillers graduate program is where we would basically bring in people from university where they might be studying chemistry or microbiology, and we would bring them then down to Middleton to do a graduate program where they would essentially start off as an apprentice and then kind of graduate up the role. So like for example, Henry previously would have been one of the distillery graduates or Jameson distillery graduates, and he would have been kind of in charge of the micro distillery. There's been some role changes a bit recently, so people have been kind of moved around. But yeah, so I think the from when I was talking to Henry when he was there, like the idea of having your own little playground, like your own little mini distillery to work with is just class.
Yeah, totally. And I remember at the time whenever I was there, that Brad Nation was still the head distiller, so I was chatting to one of the apprentice distillers and just asking like what her sort of role there was, and she was just like, well, Brian will come along and say, I want a spirit made like this.
Yeah.
And that was their job then to try and replicate that.
Basically,
yeah. So obviously fairly important before someone gets their hands on the garden stills, I would imagine.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're talking about a bit of a jump up in scale from the stills anyway.
Massive,
yeah. But no, like it's probably one of the more interesting brands, I think, for me. Like, and one of the reasons I love Method Madness is I was actually here from the start. When you look at like Jameson and Redbreast and Pars, these are brands that have been around for a very, very long time. Whereas I was involved in actually launching Method Madness, so getting to getting to introduce people to it from the idea of, from never hearing about it to tasting it and getting the reaction from it has been a kind of a new experience for me. So out of all the brands, it's probably the one that, like, at the time I found the most, unusual to work with.
Yeah. And I suppose really it's because it's innovations at its core, isn't it?
Yeah. And it really is about trying something new. And like, I think I said this already, but it doesn't always work. There's a lot of stuff unfortunately doesn't, but every so often, you get a whiskey like the chestnut or the cherry or the Hungarian oak, which we just really like.
Yeah. I suppose that is the thing, isn't it? Because as you say, like, brands like Powers, Jameson, Redbreast, Middleton, they have such a heritage, especially in Ireland. I mean, we've even there's been a bit of a backlash at times as whenever things have been rebranded. I mean, you look at, whenever Redbreast got rebranded recently, and people were just like, no, this is horrific. But then actually, now whenever you see the bottles in the flesh and you see the new label, and you're like, actually, no, that totally makes sense,
Yeah.
And even the same with Powers. I mean, there was a bit of a kickback but I mean, like, Powers, one of those sort of, and I'm one of the ones I personally still hasn't grown on me. I mean, I love the old style, but I can see like the purpose of it, where like, I mean, that's really going to stand out in the back bar now, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think like the fact that people get so upset and can be so passionate, like, while it can be frustrating, it's a good thing. That's showing that people actually really care about the brands. So if somebody's upset that you've changed the label, like, that shows that they actually really do care about it. But yeah, you can't update without some people not being a huge fan. And like the Powers one, it was such a dramatic rebrand that we knew that there was gonna be some backlash on it. But to be honest, from where Powers is, like, Powers is my favorite brand because it's the one I started working with. So like, I'm quite protective over it. But the truth is, like, it needs a new lease of life. It needs to stand out in the back bar, especially like if you look at America, such a big market. It needs to have a bit more visibility and a bit more presence.
And I think that was the thing is, I mean, as much as I love the old branding, like strangely, Powers was one of these brands that seemed to be, it was like the whiskey your dad drank or your granddad drank.
I'm just going to grab a bottle here in case anybody hasn't seen it.
So yeah, I mean, it probably did need that update, and yet the thing about it is that the actual Powers liquid is quality stuff. I mean, like, I think Powers Gold Label is like, for the money, it's brilliant.
Yeah, it's like, there's no denying it. When I first started working with Powers, the perception of it was an older person's whiskey, and it was a rural whiskey. It was a country whiskey, or just cheap. And the honest truth of it is the only reason that is because Jameson has just been in such growth, and Powers just didn't get the attention. So the people that were drinking it just got older. That's the truth of it. And like, people be like, "Oh, my granddad used to drink that," and be like, "Is that a bad thing? Your granddad obviously had good taste,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Married your granny, like."
And the thing about it is as well, then, that sadly, then people overlook, like, to me, which is one of like just the best Irish whiskies on the market, is the John's Lane.
Yeah.
I mean, for the money, the bang for buck that you get from that whiskey is, I mean, I actually prefer the John's Lane over Redbreast 12.
Yeah, I was literally about to say that Powers John's Lane is the only whiskey in that kind of price range that I would see some people choose over the Redbreast, which is interesting because people love the 12-year-old Redbreast so much.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, like, yeah, even if I was to spend 50 quid or thereabouts in a bottle of whiskey, it's what I would choose. Like, it's the perfect flavor profile for me. I love that kind of intense, like, old school pot still style.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is because on Friday in Malt, I had done a piece about blind tasting, and it was San Francisco Whiskey Club had sent me 3 samples, and I had no idea what they were, and it was a total education because it turned out they were all Irish.
Really?
But the first 2, I would have bet my bottom dollar that they were Scotch. So the first one was a 1950s Powers Gold Label. The 7-year-old.
I just literally a few days ago finally drank that, which is so it wouldn't be 50s, I think 60s actually. That would have been. What did you think of it then?
Brilliant. I mean, it was like texturally it was very different from what Powers is today, and it was
Oily,
to me
I find.
a lot richer. But to me, like the John's Lane harks back to that kind of style.
Yeah.
So I can see why John's Lane is such a popular drink. The other one that I had then was a 1965 Redbreast 12-year-old that was imported to America. I think Chris Hennessy is actually going to be doing a tasting of Redbreasts, and he has one of these bottles as well. And I actually thought it was a Glen Scotia
Really?
because it just had like, or a Clynelish, it just had this real industrial heft that was dirty, it was sooty, it was oily. You could get like the coal-fired stills off it, and it was radically different from like what we know Redbreast is now.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, to me, actually, I felt privileged being able to try those drinks because in circumspect, you're going, well, it's no wonder that people were like just falling over themselves to own Irish whiskey because it was that good.
The funny thing about Redbreast as well is like, I've tried older Redbreasts before, and some of them are fantastic. Some of them are so good, and some of them are less good. And I think the problem was it's just consistency.
Yeah.
So what we know as Redbreast now really was after Irish distillers completely revamped their wood program.
Yeah.
So we're much more particular about like where our wood comes from and the quality of wood. So you're not going to get that inconsistency. But yeah, as I said, like occasionally you would just get one that was just amazing.
Yeah, superb. Well, I suppose, in a way, harking back to thinking it was something like a Glen Scotia or being closer to it at the Springbank, those are distilleries that are very small, very craft, but people welcome the inconsistency, or they don't get annoyed about the inconsistency as much because whenever they get it right, it's superb. And I think that probably does what you were saying about the old Redbreasts. Whenever they got it right, boy, it was right. It was absolutely fantastic.
But that's why I think the 12-year-old cask strength is one that I'm always a big fan to recommend, because it's where you can get a little bit of that inconsistency.
Yes.
Where it does kind of vary a little bit. And you've seen, like in some of those groups on Facebook, people go mad over particular batches of cask strength.
Yeah. And I think, again, but that just highlights the skill that Billy has and Dave in being able to constantly put out products that really, on the mainstream side of things, are very hard to ever find much variation. You will find it. It's basically you pick up a bottle of Redbreast at the start of this year and a bottle at the end of this year, and it's pretty much going to be the same thing, But I think that is the beauty of the cask strengths, because they come out in batches. Then it does allow you to see like the differences.
Yeah, and they are there, like, and some of them sometimes they're pretty apparent.
Yeah, and massively, for whiskey geeks like us, that type of thing is brilliant, But for people who just want to have, at the end of the day, whenever you go and pick up a bottle of Redbreast 12, you know what you're going to get, and it's consistently good, I seen a question earlier on there about the rye, about where it was sourced. Just trying to find out who that was. But anyway, I don't know. Do you know where the rye?
It's actually from Ireland, the rye. So we purchased a few acres of rye around the same time that the micro was being built, with the plan of eventually distilling it in a mash bill. So yeah, it's Irish.
Excellent. So Ian has asked a question here: is there any experimentation with the mash bill cut or maturation that you would like to see tried with Irish whiskey in the future?
For me, like, to be honest, the one that I was most excited about was the rye, really. Because like before I got really into Irish whiskey, I was really, and I still am to an extent, really into American whiskey. And in particular, I love ryes. And when I tasted the rye, it tasted like an American rye whiskey, which I thought was really unusual. I expected it to taste completely different. So no, that's probably the one that I'm most excited with. And then again, the oats too. Like, oats are something that you would have seen like much more commonly a long time ago, and we're starting to see guys like Killowen are starting to incorporate this, and it is something that historically in Ireland would have been fairly common. So I think more of that traditional historic mash bills would be, I think I'd like to see a bit more of that.
Yeah, and I suppose obviously with Method and Madness, then you actually have that umbrella that you can do that.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, can you give us any insight into what might be coming next from Method and Madness?
Obviously, I can't tell you exactly what it is. I would love to, but I probably would get an earful at the very least.
Okay.
But we do have another one coming out. Fingers crossed, no guarantees, but it should be within the next year, within the next 12 months. Another wood type, a wood type that people won't have seen used before in whiskey.
Nice. Well, Mark Quinn here has just said that he's looking forward to trying the cast strength version of John's Lane and the exclusive tasting. How about us? I'm absolutely chomping at the bit to get my gums around that, to be quite honest. And I know that it's made a few waves in the Irish whiskey community, especially with some of the Powers fanatics, that they were just like, why did I not buy that box?
Yeah. I mean, it is an opportunity to try something that like is going to be very, very special. Which reminds me, I think I need to chase up Paul because I don't have any.
All right.
So I need to get some for the actual tasting. But yeah, no, I think I guess it's I find it so interesting with Powers. Out of all the brands and all the people that like consume our brands and like our brands, the people who are passionate about Powers are so passionate about it. Like you have guys that are loyal and like collect it and buy every bottle, like guys like Dave and Omar who are just super into it.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is. Like, I mean, I think it is an amazing brand, but there must just be something about it that draws people to it.
I think it's just there you go. There's my sample there, so I'm looking forward to cracking that. I think just Joe that like the quality of the liquid was just really good.
Yeah.
I think as well, it's not messed about with too much. Like, so Whiskey Rover or JJ over in Malt, he's a big fan of things that are bourbon cask matured because he thinks it allows the distillate to come through. More so than sometimes maybe you have heavy wine finishes or maturations or like the fortified wines that we're typically used to, like sherries and things. And I think that is one of the things with Powers is that it's probably of all the brands, it's the most distillate led.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. Like, it's which is one of the reasons I think people who are newer to whiskey probably find it a bit intense.
Yeah.
Like if somebody was to try, let's face it, like most people get into it either through mixing or through something like Jameson, which is designed to be a bit more of that approachable style. Whereas Powers, it is in your face about it's the spirits. Like you do get that intense distillate character coming through, and a really heavy pot still content as well. So like it is going to carry a bit of weight to it.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's what I really like about it. I love that kind of like for Middleton pot still, I always get this intense like orchard or fruit character.
Yeah.
And I guess Powers is one where, for the price that you're paying for it, you can actually experience those flavors.
Yeah. It's interesting actually because I remember being down the first time I went down to Middleton last May, I think it was. And so done the tour, and then you hooked me up with Kieran O'Donovan.
Mm-hmm.
And so he took me into the academy, into the tasting room in there, and I get that to me was just like that was like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. It was just like, oh my goodness, like imagine to get to play in that place every day. That would just be fantastic.
Yeah.
So the first thing that he done was he poured me some new make, and he goes, "What is that?" It's just like, oh god, really?
Yeah.
And the thing that I get off like the Powers distillate is just like really ripe bananas.
Yeah, definitely.
Just cuts through everything else. So I was like, I think that's Powers like 3 swallows. Like that's what one is. But what I found amazing though was then like Powers and Powers 3 swallows are very different from John's Lane. John's Lane, and they all use the same base distillate.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the maturation then after that. To me then like John's Lane becomes this like heavier, oilier, there's like leathery notes, tobacco notes. And you still get a bit of the tropical fruit coming through, but it's more about that kind of just denseness compared to Powers and the 3 swallows being a bit lighter and a bit fruitier.
Yeah. But John's Lane, like it is a whiskey that just smells old. I know that sounds like a bit of a cop out and a cheap way to describe it, but like it's like an old, dusty book. It's a little bit musty. It's a little bit meaty almost. It has that kind of an element of that gaminess to it. which again, like for me and you, like people who love that, like it's just everything I want in that kind of pot still. But
Absolutely.
it's funny, like again, it's one of those ones that I probably wouldn't give to somebody if they were new to whiskey. But if somebody liked pot still and they liked, something with a bit of weight to it, they're naturally going to love it.
Yeah, I think you're probably right there. So maybe just ask you a few more personal questions now that we've done all the brand stuff and all the rest of it. But so what actually got you into whiskey then, Joe?
I worked in a shop in Belfast, which I'm sure some people who are watching might know, called the Vineyard. Started working there when I was a teenager, and the Vineyard is kind of like a sweet shop for different spirits and wines and alcohol. Like it's a massive range, and when you work there, you kind of have to know your stuff. So just being exposed to all these different spirits and different wines naturally kind of got me into the drink scene in general. So I would have, first of all, I was really into craft beer, like, and I still am. I still love craft beer. Then I kind of gradually got into the wines, and then I don't know what it was, but something just always drew me towards whiskey in general. I think when I was like 18, whiskey was just cool, like to see somebody like order a neat whiskey in a bar and drink it. I was like, that's cool, I want to be that. So because I remember buying a bottle of whiskey, that one of the first bottles I liked, and or first bottles I bought, and I actually didn't. I found it too intense. So I started making cocktails with it. I think it was Buffalo Trace, actually, was one of the first ones. So I started making cocktails like an old fashioned, and drinking it that way. And then gradually over time, I just kind of started putting less in it, and then eventually just drinking it neat. And then eventually, one of the sales reps for the company that I work for now threw me in a bottle of Parr's 3 Swallow as a tasting bottle, to let customers try it and stuff. And I tasted it, and it was one of the first Irish whiskies really that I'd had neat. And I was like, well, this tastes really, really different to bourbon, which is what I'd been drinking. And that was the start of it really, all for me. Then I just started buying as much as I could.
I was just, whenever we were asking there about what sort of innovations maybe we would like to see, or maturations and stuff, Patrick was asking, would you like to see a Buckfast method of madness?
I've seen people doing. Paul did something with Buckfast from memory.
It has. So he's seasoned. They got a whole lot of Hungarian oak 2 litre casks off John down there at Whiskey Craft, John Daly, and so he's seasoned them with WKD Blue, apple and rum. There's a couple of other things I can't remember. Dispensed with that, and then fired Buckfast into it. Dispensed with that, and then stuck in like cast strength Bushmills. And I have to say, like I kind of regret not buying the box now, because just to see how mad that would have.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to try that one as well. On the answer of Buckfast, though, I'd say we're probably unlikely to see a Buckfast in Method Madness, but look, never say never,
Dear. But it's funny, like you're just saying about how you got into whiskey, because when I was kind of similar. I remember like when I started drinking Jack Daniels, because I was thinking that, if it was good enough for Lemmy, it was good enough for anybody. And then I remember sort of thinking that I had really progressed, because I started drinking things like Bell's and Teacher's Neat. And then that was kind of my avenue then, especially once I got into like drinking whiskey neat, was then because probably most of us probably do start off with the whole mixers, whether it's lime and ginger, or whether it's cola and lime and whatever, and then maybe progressed it on the rocks and then on the neat. So I have to say I'm pretty glad that I've progressed from those brands, to be quite honest, and been able to move on to things like Powers and Method of Madness. So was there any particular favorite ways that you like to have your whiskey? Like, I know you seem to be posting quite a lot of old fashions and cocktails and things at the minute.
I guess in some ways I am a purist. Like, most of the whiskey I drink is neat. Generally, I don't even usually put water. But then again, a lot of the whiskeys I'm drinking, like Gold Label is what I drink the most of. Like, Powers Gold Label would absolutely be my most drunk whiskey, and I just have it neat, have it straight up. But if I'm having a cocktail, actually these days less of an old fashioned. I actually really love Sazeracs.
I love Sazerac as well.
Yeah, like something about a Sazerac. Like, I love vermouth in general, and I love whiskey, so the combination of the two. And then
That's probably the only good use of absinthe that I can think of.
Yeah, yeah. So I've got my absinthe now in a wee spray bottle for like just doing a wee rinse.
Good idea.
Yeah, but no. Generally, I like kind of more spirit forward cocktails.
Yeah.
For long drinks, like I'd quite be partial to Jameson ginger and lime. If I'm at an event or something. But generally, I drink my whiskey kind of the way it comes out of the bottle.
Yeah. Much like that myself, although I have to say that, whenever you are in places like the Merchant or the Clothier, like, I mean, I absolutely love the Sazeracs in the Merchant.
Yeah.
Jamie Cotter, that we all know very well, he introduced me to the espresso martinis down in the Clothier. I was a bit dubious at the start. I thought it was maybe a drink that like Louise would have been more into, but I have to say it was it was pretty tasty stuff. So I'm pretty partial to one of those every now and again.
You know what? During lockdown, at the end of the business week, everybody in Dillon Bass got onto a Zoom call together, and we would all, like, basically myself and the other brand ambassadors would show them how to make cocktails. And some of the cocktails I was making, like, we were making like cosmopolitans. I never had a cosmopolitan before. Not a bad drink. Like, I was drinking pink drinks, and we were having Pegu clubs and all these other cocktails I never would have.
Anyway, Joe.
Sorry.
So the drinks would have matched your shirts anyway.
It did, yeah. It's pretty much a perfect pink. And like, I'd probably get in trouble for saying this, because I'm a whiskey man, but big fan of margarita. Like, I've been drinking, really taking to margaritas lately.
Yeah. I remember over in Canada, actually, they do one called a Bulldog, which is a rather large margarita glass, and then they put a Corona upside down on it. So whenever you're drinking, you get the mixture of the margarita and the Corona. That's like rocket fuel, but it's absolutely gorgeous.
I mean, I'd certainly try it, look.
Well, there you go. There's one that you can try with your next meetup whenever you meet the brand ambassadors.
I'd say if I do that in front of Dillon Bass, I might get a bit of a funny look if I just start pouring beer into my cocktails.
So, I mean, is there any? Maybe I shouldn't ask this question, but are there any brands outside of the company that you work for that you particularly like?
Yeah, you've already mentioned it. Like, I'm a big fan of Springbank. I really love. In particular, like the 15-year-old Springbank is one that I've always been a really big fan of. Am I right thinking you don't like it?
It's not that I don't like it. I just had a bad experience with one. And that's the whole thing about Springbank is, like, when I scored it a 3 out of 10, I think it was the 2018 version of the Springbank 15. Funnily enough, Joe, like, I love Springbank 10. Springbank 15 I've always been a bit middling about. This particular one I just found was really aggressive. It was really like chili pepper heat, and it was dominant. So, yeah, so I've caught a bit of stick for that review, but I mean, it doesn't put me off by any Springbank or Longrow or Hazelburn product.
You're used to a bit of controversy anyway.
No, that's it, exactly. Like, I mean, I have the last year's 12-year-old cast strength Springbank, and I have to say again, I'm a bit kind of like, yeah, it's grand, but I'm not like going mad over it,
Yeah.
But when Springbank get things right, it's mind blowing.
Yeah, but like, in terms of other drinks, really, I think, like, I have an open mind about, like, I'll try anybody's product. I'm
yeah.
And I like to move outside the category as well. So I know we've already touched on it, but like, especially when I go on holiday, the one thing I want to do is, like, drink the native drink, whatever it is. If it's sherry and you're in Spain or wherever else, like, I like to kind of try what's different. But yeah, in terms of whiskeys, like, there's so much now. There's so much great whiskey in the market. I think it can be hard to navigate sometimes. Which I suppose is where like samples exchanging and things, those are great, and bottle shares are great.
Shares are brilliant.
Yeah, no, really great way to drink whiskey. But yeah, no, like, I like to move in and out of a lot of categories, which can be expensive. But
I think that's always a good thing as well. Like, I suppose sometimes, I mean, I've had a conversation with, like, people like Jarlath and stuff, and like, in Ireland, maybe peated whiskies are something that a lot of people don't explore, because historically over the last 30 or 40 years we've been sort of bombarded with the Irish whiskey is smooth thing. But actually, then you try some of the older whiskies from Ireland and you're like, well, they were anything but smooth. They were quite robust.
Yeah.
And sometimes they had that kind of industrial feel that some of the Scotches have. And obviously, like a lot of the whiskey in the west of Ireland actually would have been peated because that was the source of fuel that they had for the kilns. Um, and so I'm kind of glad. I'm glad to see now that like peated whiskey is making a bit of a comeback in Ireland as well. But I do sort of think it's a good thing to have an open mind. Fair enough. It's like anything. Like sometimes you may try a bourbon and you don't particularly like it, but eventually you'll find a bourbon that actually hits the point with you. And it's the same with rye. It's the same with peated whiskies and Scotch.
Yeah. It's easy to dismiss a whole category from one experience, but there's so much out there.
If you drink like Johnny Walker Red Label, I mean, I can understand why you wouldn't ever want to look at a Scotch bottle, because I mean the stuff is terrible. I mean it's along the sort of same lines as Proper 12. Sorry, Tim, but I see we have a genuine question here from Ian. He's asking, is the M&M hoodie available for Cedar Summer?
Sorry, which one? Sorry, the M&M
hoodie. Ian.
Oh, no. Unfortunately, to get one of these, you need to either work for Irish distillers or have done something really impressive for us. But like the unfortunately the Method Madness stuff, like it is class. Like we did Method Madness jumpers and there's Method Madness socks and stuff. It's some of the coolest merch I think out of any of the portfolio.
Can you tell us something about the guys who designed it, like M&E Design over in Sweden? Because I mean the bottles are absolutely stunning. Like I mean I just think that is like one of the most beautiful things.
So like I'll just show you. I know we're talking about the whiskey, but I actually love the gin bottle. The gin bottle is one of my favorites.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's two different artists kind of came up with this concept for us. So you can kind of see even on the side, wanted to go with method. You're kind of more rigid, more conformed, and then on the other side you've got your madness, and then that's the same kind of on the side of the label as well. So really, really creative. Really creative design behind it, and they did actually win. They did win an award for it. And this particular glass as well, I just love this like teal. It's kind of like old English glass or something.
Yeah.
But when we first showed people the bottles, like people didn't really get it. Like a lot of the initial feedback when we showed them the whiskey labels were like, oh, that looks like a gin, or it looks kind of zen, or weren't really too sure about it. But it's one of those things that generally, I think when you actually see it in person, people generally tend to appreciate it a bit more. It's never going to be for everyone. That's the thing is like if you were to look at, I don't think I have a whiskey bottle, Method Madness, but if you look at it on a shelf, your first thought isn't going to be, oh, there's an Irish whiskey.
No.
Well, I mean, thinking, what is that?
The thing is, Joe, that see the amount of people that have asked me that, see, whenever you're finished with that bottle, will you give it to me?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people want to make lamps or just use them for flower displays and things like that because they just think they're absolutely awesome looking, So
yeah, I've seen them in bars with candles coming out of them and flowers and all sorts like. Yeah, they stand out. But like when the guys were designing them, it had to look different. Like if it looked like Jameson or looked like Redbreast, it just wouldn't have worked. We had to it had to stand out and be like, this is something completely different. This is a whole new brand, and it's not going to be like any of our other whiskies.
Yeah. Grand stuff. Well, I'm seeing here that Basil's cat tower is getting a lot of love as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, I had to put him upstairs. I don't know if anyone doesn't know, I have a cat, and throughout lockdown, he regularly likes to interrupt any of my calls, generally by climbing up the back of his chair. So he's been relegated to the upstairs, unfortunately, for the time being.
Poor Basil. Well, I'm sure we'll see more of him on his channel anyway, Joe.
Yeah.
So I don't know, does anybody else out there have any more questions for Joe before maybe think about wrapping things up? If you want to fire anything in. I suppose one thing like I would maybe just ask or get your opinion on is like, or have you done like the Whiskey Academy, the 2-day course down in Dublin?
I've been through the academy quite a few times actually. So I went through it when I first started the job, just to get more like formal experience or formal training, and I've not since taken customers down to go through it.
Yeah,
and like it's the Irish Whiskey Academy is there for people who just want the best education on Irish whiskey. This is for people who are super into it.
Yeah.
It is very comprehensive. Like there's different levels you can do. You can do a half day, you can do a day, or you can do the full 2 day experience. And the full 2 day will get you like you'll cover your raw materials, you'll cover your brewing, your distillation, your maturation, even a section on bottling. So like it is pretty intense, and it is it's a classroom environment. Like you're in there, and there's
Okay.
you'll be taking notes, and there's a blackboard, and there's video shown, but it's done in a really like tactile and fun way.
Yeah.
So no, like I think if you're like, don't get me wrong, it's not cheap by any means,
No.
but I think when you factor in everything that comes with it, it is still quite good value.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I mean, I've been eyeing up the 2 day course for quite a while now, so if I could stop buying bottles of whiskey, I would definitely invest in it. But
yeah, that's a dilemma I'm faced with quite often, unfortunately.
So Whiskey Jason's just asking us, we've touched on it already, but just to reiterate, what is next from Method and Madness?
Yeah, so much as I would love to tell you, I can't be specific, but there is a new product that we're working on, which we're aiming to have out by, I want to say March time next year. But again, with these things, like can't commit. You never know especially with Method Madness, where it's so new and unpredictable. Like we don't know if it'll work entirely, but I know that we did try this type of wood. It didn't work initially, and we were having problems with it. But I think that's since changed, so we're actually a bit happier with the result of it now. So, like I said, plan B, and that'll be kind of spring next year. All goes according to plan.
Excellent. Thomas then has asked a question here. Have you any advice on how to improve a person's palate for whiskey tasting?
Yeah, expose yourself to as many different flavors as you can. Like this isn't just for whiskey, but like I have a friend of mine who's he is a roaster. I think you might have met him, Stephen.
Bailey's
Stephen, he's a good friend of mine, but he's a coffee roaster. And what he said to me really made me think. Once he goes into the supermarket, and every time he's there, he'll buy something that he hasn't tasted before, like whether it's a fruit or a vegetable or something he sees on the shelf, and taste it, and uses that then as a frame of reference. And like that makes perfect sense, because you'll hear people describe sometimes a whiskey, and they'll use a term or a taste that you've never encountered before. So just being able to experience as many different flavors as possible is a great way to do it. And like use your own references as well. Like you'll notice when I did the Method Madness single malt, I literally compared that to fruit pastels and cola cubes, because that's what I get from it. And a lot of people will know what that is. So I think there's a tendency sometimes to over describe and try and impress people with language, but like use what you're familiar with. If you find a particular aroma or taste coming across and that's what you get, don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Like everybody's palate is unique. But no, the one thing I would say is try as much as you can, and try other whiskeys, try other spirits, not just food too.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I mean, I suppose the other thing is practice. Do I remember whenever I first got into whiskey review, and I was reading like some of the guys on Malt Review, or is reading stuff maybe like Jim Murray or whoever it was, and you're going like, I don't think I could ever pick up on something like that. But actually, the more you do it, then the more you're actually engaging. I suppose it's muscle memory in a sense, is that the more you're engaging those faculties.
Yeah.
And as you say, things are very personal. Like I have noticed with the guys who write in malt here in America, they will refer to certain fruits or vegetables or even candy that they only get over there. So like that doesn't relate to me. But at the same time, something like a blackjack sweet, they probably haven't a clue what that is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that is the thing. It's I find myself doing the same thing as what your friend from the coffee guy was saying, was when I would go into Sainsbury's, and especially if they have things like papaya and guava and stuff like that, I go and buy those just so that, because they're generally limited release, just to refresh my palate, so that I can go, and that's the type of flavors I would pick up on a lot of, like some of the Bushmills and things like that. They have a whole load of tropical fruit. So it is good to go and just do that type of thing and just broaden your horizon, even if you get the stuff.
Yeah, and just refresh your memory as well. I mean, now that you mentioned, I can't remember the last time I've eaten guava. Like I remember once, I'd been describing a whiskey as having a coconut character for ages, and then I actually tasted coconut, and I was like, it's not
Yeah.
coconut at all. It tastes like a bounty, you know, when you ever actually have a real coconut, like
Yeah.
a fleshy fruit. So yeah, I mean, try as much as you can, and like it does sound weird to say it when you're talking about drinking whiskey, but practice. You know, sit down and drink it and taste it and try and get your head around it.
And actually, like one of the guys in Malt, Adam, he's a big advocate of using a spittoon. Not something, you know, he comes from a wine background, and so he's a lot more used to using a spittoon. I suppose sometimes I have this thing, well, I've just paid 60 quid for a bottle of whiskey, I don't want to spit it out. But you know,
Yeah.
but I get his point, because, like, you know, even though you can practice, you kind of have to do it responsibly as well, because like you have your health to look, long-term health to look after and things. So actually, I've taken that now whenever I go to like the whiskey social or go to whiskey live and things, that, you know, I don't drink everything.
Oh, you couldn't possibly, like, you know.
So sometimes actually using the spittoon is pretty good, especially maybe if it's like starting off in one of your like cheaper bottles. Maybe if you have a bottle of Buffalo Trace, or you have a bottle of Bushmills, or a bottle of Powers, whatever it is, like the gold label, and you don't mind, you know, maybe spitting out a couple of shots or something, you know. So maybe not a bad way of doing it. Peter, he's mentioned this thing, which is something I heard whenever I went down to Waterford last year, and I'd never heard of this before. But he has said there that he finds an espresso before tasting really shows up any sweetness in whiskey.
I've never encountered that before. I mean, I'm open to trying it, but I would just find espresso so intense, like it's going to really stick to your palate.
Yeah. And then Eamon, he's just and that's the thing. I've kind of found that, Joe. I just think maybe the bitterness then unbalances your palate, because then maybe the bitterness of the coffee is going to be so much that you won't be able to pick out bitter notes in the coffee, and all you get, or in the whiskey, and all you get is sweetness. So
yeah, I mean, it might be a great way to enjoy it though. Like, you know, if it like that's to say, it might not be the best way to actually taste the whiskey and get the most out of it, but like, yeah, this has to be said as well. Like, a lot of people forget that whiskey is just something you're meant to enjoy. You know, don't worry. Like, you don't have to come up with this crazy taste notes and impress everybody. Like, if you're enjoying it, that's the most important thing.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's actually, I was chatting to Jim Ingram at the end of the week there, and just chatting about doing whiskey reviews. And like, you know, I went through a phase last year where I didn't really do a lot, because actually I wasn't enjoying it, because I was having to sit down and think about everything I was drinking, rather than just going, oh yeah, that's, you know, I enjoy drinking that.
Yeah.
So sometimes it can get a wee bit tiresome, like, and sometimes it is really nice just to sit down with a dram and just relax and enjoy it whatever way you want.
Switch off.
Whether it's long, whether it's with ice, whatever, there is no wrong. I see here as well that we had a comment there from Eamon saying that he loves Ralphie's reviews, but he sometimes uses terms of reference that he has never experienced or desire to. One was unripe plantain. So yeah, like, I mean, unless you're really into Caribbean cuisine,
can't say I would know what that would taste like.
Plantain, you know. So, but here, Joe, like, we've been on for like an hour and 3/4, and I could do with a drink of water and whatever. And thank you so much for spending the time with us. Thanks to everybody who has been watching and sent in questions. Actually, I just thought it'd be interesting just to go through the polls really quickly here, Joe. So the single grain, 45% of the mark was a 7. So that was pretty good going. Nearly everything was all high marks pretty much. We only had a few at 6 and 5. The single malt universally was applauded. Again, most were 7s, but you had a 10, you had a 9, had a few 8s. The chestnut pot still, great scores. In fact, that was an even spread between 7s, 8 and 9s. The Hungarian oak, 7 took it again, but there was a few 9s and 8s. The cherry, we have a few 8s, a few 7s. Only one person said that they weren't too sure about it. And the gin, apart from one person, was pretty much universally adored. So that's pretty good feedback for the Ranger. You know?
No, that's good. And like, it's totally subjective as well. So anytime I've done tastings, even like on Method Madness or different brands, like, you can get different reactions every time, you know?
Absolutely. Well, anyway, Joe, like, thank you very much. I'm going to go here and get set up for chatting to Anna here as well, and it's been a long time since we've seen each other in the flesh. Actually, it's probably been back to about February. Hopefully,
Cool.
whenever things start easing up a wee bit, we can have a wee dram together again down in the Jury
absolutely.
Battles or something, you know.
Sounds good to me. Well, listen, no, thanks very much, Phil. It was good chatting to you, and thanks to everybody for commenting and getting involved. I had a bit of crack. I enjoyed this, and I hope you enjoyed the whiskey. So I'm gonna go get some lunch now and then start getting ready for the next tasting.
I am free Basil too.
Yeah, I can hear him scratching the door here, so I'm gonna go let him in.
All right, Joe. Thanks very much, mate.
All right, cheers, Phil. See you later.
Cheers, man.
Sadly, that brings our whiskey tasting to a close. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. I think Method and Madness are some of the most exciting whiskies we've released in a long time, and I was very excited to share them with you. If you'd like to keep up to date with any local events or news about our brands, just follow us at Whiskey Club NI or visit our website, whiskeyclub.com. Thanks.